My name is Alex Tran, and for my educational infomercial, I'm going to be discussing antibiotic use and abuse and the rise of superbugs. So, what are superbugs and where did they come from? So, to talk about superbugs, we need to establish what antibiotics are first. Antibiotics are essentially antimicrobial agents usually produced by bacteria or more commonly fungi that hinders the pathogenic or disease-causing nature of infectious bacteria. Some of the common generic antibiotics we use today include but are not limited to penicillin, methicillin, daptomycin, amoxicillin, clindamycin, and so on. Superbugs, however, are bacteria that develop antibiotic resistance and are no longer hindered or killed by the antibiotics that are designed to kill them. So, to quickly go over this, with the causes of antibiotic resistant superbugs, there is the natural way and the human way. For the natural way, it can be summarized into three general naturally occurring mechanisms that allows bacteria to become antibiotically resistant. Essentially what it is that a resistant gene in one bacteria will be transferred to a bacteria that does not have that resistant gene in one way or another. With that being said, however, there are man-made ways, whether intentional or not, that allow bacteria to resist antibiotics. And one of the most common causes is antibiotic misuse, which applies more to individuals, such as not using antibiotics only prescribed by your local physician, sharing or using leftover antibiotics, and self-prescription. The next common cause of superbugs is extensive agricultural use of them. According to a journal written by Ventola in 2015, both in the developed and developing world, antibiotics are widely used as growth supplements in livestock. And an estimated 80% of antibiotics sold in the US are used in animals. But an overuse of this concept also run the risk of killing or suppressing the susceptible bacteria while inadvertently allowing antibiotically resistant bacteria to thrive, which can be transmitted to humans through the food supply and can cause infections in humans. Some people may think that, okay, all we have to do is just be ahead of the curve and crank out a lot of antibiotics that can cover for humans for a couple of lifetimes. However, that's easier said than done. According to the same author, the production of antibiotics is both expensive and full of risks because despite of all the research and the potential efficacy, it could immediately be rendered useless due to more inevitable resistance. And as a result, this thought has left many in the pharmaceutical or healthcare investors to be pessimistic or unwilling to produce more antibiotics. So even with the more optimistic pharmacies in the industry willing to put in the effort, the process is still unbearably long. All right, so going into global trends over the decades. So as you can see here, this is a chart that's ripped straight from the CDC website. And as you can see, the penicillin was released and publicly used in clinical settings in 1941. However, a year later, there is a resistant strain identified against penicillin with Staphylococcus aureus. And this is a common trend with all of the major antibiotics introduced. And then about approximately a year or 50 years later, there comes a resistant strain. So according to the CDC, antibiotic resistance occurs as a natural process in which bacteria evolved. And the rates of superbugs will unfortunately continue to increase as long as we keep using antibiotics. According to the World Economic Forum, superbugs kill approximately 700,000 people a year and is projected to rise up to 10 million by 2050. And new treatments to tackle this public health risk aren't being created fast enough to the point where we're actually seeing a slow decrease in advanced antibiotic innovation that may threaten global efforts to slow the rate of superbugs, according to the World Health Organization in 2020. According to the CDC, each year about 2.8 million people are infected with antibiotic-resistant bacteria, and more than 35,000 people die as a result. Unfortunately, the rate of superbugs is still rising with more fatal illnesses, especially fatal for individuals with chronic diseases. And resistance is inevitable the more antibiotics are prescribed and consumed by patients. And here are some examples of common superbugs that have taken the world by storm in the past few decades. Despite the narrowing progress in new antibiotic drugs, the fight is still very well alive. If you guys haven't heard, the World Health Organization issued a warning that global efforts in fighting superbugs is dwindling, which is very unfortunate. Fortunately though, people who are not healthcare investors like the CDC have provided plans to develop healthcare associated infection programs against superbugs within the local and state levels since 2014. Two of the many programs that they have for this effort includes Clean Hands Count and Get Ahead of Sepsis, which was launched a year after as well. But we often forget that we don't always have to rely on only antibiotics to solve our microbial problems. Us as individuals have the power to easily achieve and maintain primary prevention, such as hand washing, proper use of antibiotics, sanitations, proper food preparation, and most importantly, listening to our local healthcare professionals. On a primordial scale, we and so many other policymakers and even healthcare specialists can increase awareness of superbugs by making information available to more people on the impact of antibiotic resistance. We could strengthen policies, programs, and implementation of health interventions and control measures of resistance. So to just wrap up my presentation, I have available resources that you can go through about superbugs. To be frank though, there aren't many local organizations that are specifically aimed to eradicating superbugs, but the science community as a whole supports the notion that public health, education, and controlled development of superbugs on a research level can help slow the global incidence of antibiotically resistant superbugs. And here I have more websites here about MRSA if you want to go look through them, and more info about drug-resistant tuberculosis with these websites as well. That pretty much wraps up my educational infomercial. Thank you so much for watching and watching all the way to the end. Stay safe and stay healthy.